In this video, we're going to talk about 16 tips that will help you take your Zoom online music lessons to the next level. I had a great response to my first video on Zoom music lessons. If you haven't seen that, you really should watch that one first. I'll link it up here and also in the description below. And as always, if you'd like to say thank you for this instruction, and you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe right now and click on the notification bell. That way you'll know when the next video comes out. The most important thing by far is actually going to be the internet connection. Now, we've had various experiences between myself and pupils over the last few weeks, and certainly this has been the most important factor on getting both a good, reliable connection and the better sound quality. Now, the first thing to understand is that the internet connection, if you like, is a bit like a road. We can have a really fast two-way stream like a motorway, or we can have a slower stream where, you know, it's a country road and we've got to wait for one car to go and then the other car can come the other way. Now, we want to check to make sure we're on the fastest road possible, and the best way to do that is to check your internet speed. Now, all you need to do is go to this website called speedtest.net. And here there's a big button in the middle that says go. So when you press on that button, it will start to check your internet speed. Now, I am on a fast connection here, and you can see this is whizzing up to something in the sort of mid 300s megabits per second. This is like a super fast motorway, if you like. Now, if you are looking at that speed test and it's down, say, below 5 or 10 megabytes per second, you might start to struggle a little bit with that. So the best thing to do, go find a different place in the house or try to be nearer to your router. That might be a better way of improving your internet connection speed, and you'll find that will make a massive difference. Now, the best way to get the very best internet connection on your laptop device or PC is actually not to use Wi-Fi at all. You're much better to use a direct Ethernet connection. So if you can get a cable that will run between your computer and your internet router and plugging directly, you're definitely going to see an increase in speed there. Maybe turn off your Wi-Fi on your laptop to make sure that it's going through that faster connection. That could help you as well. But Ethernet connection, definitely the way to go if you can. Thirdly, we all spend a lot of time on the internet nowadays, and most people are going to be sharing a house with other family members. Now, just like that motorway, if you've got loads more cars using the motorway, things are going to slow down. So if at all possible, ask the other members in your household to lay off the internet. If somebody is using, Netflix or playing an online game or something, that's definitely going to have an impact on your Zoom lesson. So if at all possible, just ask them, in the next half an hour, could you just lay off it for a little while? That's probably going to make a massive difference as well. Our devices, whether they're laptops or handheld devices, are always doing stuff in the background. Now, that stuff could be eating away at the quality of your connection. So the more of that stuff we can get rid of, the better. Now, a couple of things that you could do here on the iPad. What we can do is we can close down some of the background applications. So if you double click on your home button, or on the newer devices, swipe up slowly from the bottom and hold it there in the middle. You'll get this screen where you can close off applications, and all we want to do is swipe upwards and make sure that we're closing anything that we don't need right at that point. And that can make a massive difference. The other thing that we can do is if you go to your settings in your iPad and go to General, then you'll find this setting in this column here, which is Background App Refresh. Here we can turn off everything that's there, and again that'll stop the iPad or the device doing things in the background which could be eating up some of our speed data that we need for the lesson. So if you are struggling for internet speed, if you haven't got a great connection, it's worth looking into these little settings to help you get a much better experience in your Zoom lesson. You'll remember in the first video we talked about the importance of what they call original sound. Now remember, the Zoom application was intended really for spoken word. It had special settings built into it that cut out sort of background office noise or telephones ringing or people jeering or whatever might be in the background, so it could just concentrate on the voice. Now that's not great when we're using musical instruments because we're going to have quite a big range of volume to deal with. So the Zoom applications have something called original sound, which is where it turns off all of those automatic settings that Zoom tries to make for us, and we don't want those as musicians. Now, at the time of my last video, that was only available on the computer versions. Now we can get it on our tablets and iPhones as well. So I'm here on my iPad and I'm going to the very bottom left-hand corner in the Zoom application and I'm clicking on Meetings for the settings. And I'm scrolling down until you can see Use Original Sound. Now, by default, this will be off. You need to turn it to be on. Now, that's not quite it, because when you're actually in your meeting, you're going to have to enable the setting each time you do this. So here we are on the iPad app and I'm going to touch the top three little buttons where it says More, and here you can see it says Enable Original Sound. Okay, now it's on and ready for us to use. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to redo that every time you use this application because by default it turns itself off. The original sound setting is probably the most useful thing about using Zoom as an application for music lessons. So please don't forget to look into it and at least experiment with what results you get with it turned on and turned off. There's some evidence to suggest that Zoom audio quality isn't actually at its very best until you've done a screen share. Now, when you click on the screen share option, you have this screen come up. Excuse me if the picture's slightly odd on this because it's the way I'm recording it for YouTube. And what happens is you will need to click on the bottom left hand corner where it says Share Computer Sound. Now once you've done that, you'll probably find that well, you'll be able to play over Zoom iTunes or Spotify or whatever you want to, show a movie or whatever you want to do on Zoom, but it will also up the bit rate, as it were, for the audio quality. So that is another way that you can improve your sound quality over Zoom. Now, you'll have to do that every time, I'm afraid, because that setting gets cancelled out every time you finish a meeting. Being able to use more than one camera angle can be useful when you're teaching. I demonstrated in the last video having my webcam above the piano. Now, if you are using something like an iPad device, I can't quite demonstrate this for you live as it were now because it's the setup with currently recording the YouTube video as well, but I'll talk you through it. So you have your main device with your meeting on it. What you can do is have a second device, say something like another iPad or an iPhone, And you can have that device as on a second account. Now, effectively what you do is you make a meeting between yourself and yourself. That means you've got your iPad in one account, your iPhone in another account, and you basically make a meeting where the two of them are in the same meeting. Now what you'll have on your screen is two pictures there, where one, say, could be a top-down view of your piano, and the other will be the talking head picture, if you like. This can be really useful and works really well. It takes a little bit of setting up, and again, you'll have to do it every time you start a new meeting. But if you really want to use your iPad as a second camera device, or your iPhone as a second camera device, that's one way that you can get around it. As I said, if you want to look at the way I set my stuff up here, then hang on for that next video, because I do things quite differently myself here in my own studio. Another little tip is that, if you are really struggling with slow internet speed, reducing the traffic can help just a little bit. So for instance, if you're listening to a pupil, you could actually mute your mic whilst they are playing. That can just free up a tiny bit of data information that can help your quality. And if it really gets tricky, you could even turn off your video stream while you're listening to somebody play. All of these things can just reduce the amount of information that Zoom has to deal with if you are struggling with a poor quality internet connection. As teachers, we would really appreciate being able to get the best possible view of you and your instrument. We did touch on this in the last video, but pretty cheaply there are some good stands available, both for laptops and for things like iPads and tablet devices, from only around £20 off Amazon. I found a couple that I think are really good. These allow you to sort of tilt the angle of your device safely. I've had a couple of pupils who have rather precariously balanced their iPad, £1,000 worth of equipment, and the things have been falling. This is not good. For £20 to make it secure, get a stand for the device if you possibly can, and it also means you can get a really good angle so that the teacher can see exactly what you're doing. Well worth the outlay. Remember, if you're playing an instrument, particularly something quite loud like a saxophone, a trumpet or whatever, even with that original sound turned on, you can't really just play, with your trumpet right next to a microphone that is actually set up to hear your voice quite well. You'll need to probably get used to stepping further back away from the microphone or the device when you are playing, and then come back to the microphone when you're wanting to speak. I know it's hassle, but it's going to work the best for us. It's a good idea to turn off those background notifications, because certainly on an iOS device, if you get a call coming in or a notification, it's probably going to stop the transmission of the lesson briefly. It's just an unnecessary interruption to the lesson. So if you can turn off the notifications, again, that will be in your settings. It's a pretty good idea. The final bits of advice are about the security settings. The application, as I said, has been updated, and I think people are much happier now. Personally, I've had no problem at all with the security in the app. When I'm using Zoom, I tend to dial directly to my pupils because I have them all as contacts. From what I've read, the problems with Zoom arise when you put out, say, a meeting ID onto, a Facebook website or something. That can lead to problems. Now, the new things that have been put into place are things like every meeting now has to have a password. So if you're doing a meeting where you're sending a request, via email, it'll have to have a password now by default. Again, you might remember in the first video I said about setting that waiting room feature. Now, as far as I can see, that is now standard for everybody. So when your meeting begins, I believe both parties now have to go through the waiting room process. That just means that anybody that shouldn't be joining the meeting, if you see a name pop up there and you think, well, who's that? You can just dismiss them straight away. So it's a good little security feature. Also, as you're connecting to your lesson, you might find now that it comes and asks you, do you want to use, computer or internet audio? You'll have to allow it to do that. I think there's a setting where you can probably make that happen by default. But if you look on your tablet device and see that there is a line through the headphone symbol on your settings, then that probably means that you need to touch on that and allow the application to use the internet audio. Again, I think this is part of the security updates. So that's what I have for you so far. If there are any more bits of advice, I'll do another video. So remember to subscribe and click that notification bell. The main takeaway here is definitely internet speed. Those first few things I talked about early in the video are probably the most important things you can do to improve your Zoom lessons. Update your app because it's going to be good for those security features. But like I say, watch out if you want to use my special setup that I'm doing. I'm having to hold off the update just for now because there's something that it interferes with that we don't want to happen. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy your lessons. Stay safe, everybody.